Hey, so I'm back here with another little build video here. This is part 3, the cab, and this all started with trying to get the Dentside Ford disassembled in a way that made sense. And at this point, I wasn't sure what I was going to need from the Dentside, so I was careful about how I disassembled things, and wasn't sure, what mounts I was going to use. At this point, it was just disassembly and trying to keep as many parts as I could together as a whole, and also like dimensional values as well, like the width. So once I started looking at getting the cab off, that was, a process in itself, just trying to disassemble. I wasn't sure what dash I was going to use. I wasn't sure what parts of the Ford, like the emergency brake cable, all of that stuff that you don't really consider in a normal build because it's all going to be used again. There you can see a Dodge I was working on in the background. But yeah, once I got the cab off of the Ford, then I was able to kind of shimmy the Dodge frame underneath and start looking at how things were going to lay out. And it honestly didn't look too bad. Like, I thought I was in okay shape. But I realized that I was going to have to move that engine backwards. So this is just the Ford sitting outside of the garage. That frame is very solid if you know someone who needs a solid Dentside frame. But anyway, the Cummins engine is very long, so I knew I was going to have to move it back in order to fit the air-to-air radiator and condenser on the front. So that's kind of where we're at now, just kind of showing you pictures of the distance between the back of the valve cover and the frame, or the firewall. So that's kind of an idea there I had with mounting the cab. You can see the control arm brackets are in the way from the Dodge, which I took care of later. And then I was trying to come up with some ideas on how to mount the cab. So getting the cab mounts designed and just kind of getting something that would work. There you can kind of see a rough cutout and some rough fabrication done. At this point, I didn't know what was going to clear, what was going to hit. And, later on, I found that these, in fact, they were an issue, that I had to trim a little bit off of them. But hindsight's 2020. So I was able to get the cab mounted on the frame, and there you can kind of see it taking shape. Looks like a Dentside, and it's hard to tell that it's Dodge if it wasn't for the wheels. But there you can see like the body lines kind of coming together, and things are just kind of moving along there. Got the cab mounts on. There's the rear cab mounts and brackets. So everything is just way in on the Dentside compared to the Dodge. It's not even close. So there I am pulling the engine out for the first time. And I had this engine out and back in countless times. I have never pulled or put an engine back in more times in my life. And it was all due to trying to get that engine back. That's 6 inches to get some clearance up front for the Cummins air-to-air and cooling system. So there's me standing inside of the frame rails. And all you got to keep in mind, like, all this didn't happen in a day. We're talking probably 2 months worth of, trial and attempts and failures, and things didn't just work. You had to make them work. So they're the factory Dodge engine mounts that I cut off. And you can see kind of the layout there, and there's a curvature to the Dodge frame that makes this kind of a challenge. There's the inside of the, so there's the engine mounts kind of burned on there. I added some bracketry for some reinforcement. And then you start having accessory drive issues, power steering reservoir hit, power steering pump hit, AC pump hit. Just because, you move things back in a frame, it's not designed to be there. So then, you start trimming, and then you set the cab back down and everything hits. So then I was like, okay, well, that's all the closer I could get. I thought maybe I put a body lift on the truck and I'd be out of harm's way. But that valve cover was certainly making dead contact with the Firewall, and that's the Ford Firewall. But I did have enough, plenty of room, I felt, to get the radiator in and all the parts that I needed for the cooling system. There you can see the huge Ford inner fenders and how tight that is in there. And this is just setting the fenders in place just for mock-up to see how I did wheelbase-wise. And I hit the wheelbase dead on. Those wheels are dead center in the wheel arches. So, it's a lot of putting together just to see and then taking back apart. And the radiator support's just kind of sitting there, supporting the two fenders at this point. So, and there's some of the notching. I had to notch the frame and box it in, and the cross member. I ended up notching that for the AC compressor. I want the AC to work on this truck, so I'm very, I want everything functional. I don't want to have to remove anything. That's part of the Dodge cowl, or actually the Dodge cowl out of the cab. I cut that out thinking I had some plans for that. And now we're getting to the point where we're starting to lay out Firewall. So this Ford Firewall I realized was not going to work. So I just kind of cut a piece. I cut the Dodge Firewall out first, laid it over top of it, and kind of used it as a template, and then just started cutting the Ford away. And then once I started putting the two together, I realized how far off things were and how much work it was going to take to actually graft that Dodge Firewall. But you can see how much further in it sticks. That gains tons of clearance when you're considering that long valve cover of that Cummins. But it had a huge gap on the bottom to play in, to factor in, and then at the top, I had that gap, which I needed because the windshield wipers in that Ford cab actually run inside. And in a Dodge, they run in a cowl, but in the Dentside Ford, they run inside of the cab. So I had to do quite a bit of modifying and, adjusting to get that Firewall in there and have it clear the wiper arms and have them fully functional. So just having functional wipers with this swap was definitely a job. But there you can kind of see things, getting welded in and just keep in mind, like, all this has to come apart. There's a lot of finish work that I'm going to do to blend all this in, seam sealer, etc., to make it show worthy, or at least suit me. So, there's the wiper test. I had a battery in there, just kind of testing the wiper arms, making sure that they were going to work. And, in hindsight, I have a Dodge wiper control system. So having a 79 Dentside F-150 with intermittent wipers is kind of a rare thing. So, that's kind of one of the perks. I have all the 2007 electronics to use to my advantage. There you can see the Dodge heater box, evaporator control box, all that's going in. And at that point, I decided, well, I'm going to try to put the Dodge dash in this cab. So there I am cutting the cross member for the transmission because I moved the engine back 6 inches. So the transmission had to go back 6 inches. And that's all. So until next time, we'll see what we get into.